All right, we're on the next episode of Blood Money. Today we have Austin Steinbart with us. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing okay. How about you? We got a lot
Good, good.
to talk about this evening, man.
Yeah. It's always exciting to have you on. For the viewers, Austin's one of my favorite guests, and the reason I like having Austin on so much is because we have the most intense conversations. Both of us, I think, have a real proficient understanding of all the crazy things happening in this world, where the source of our problems are, and for that, I'm very excited to have Austin here. The topic of this episode is the oncoming potential of World War III. So, Austin, why don't you tee this up? Tell us. Let's start from the historic perspective of how we got here, how this is a recurring theme throughout history. The mic is yours.
So we, as a lot of people can see in the news, a lot of people know something big is happening here. And we appreciate the geopolitical moment that we're in history, because this is about to be stuff that we've never seen. So as a country, a lot of the other countries there's a new economic world order forming, and we have collapse. And this time it's going to be different. This time they're not going to be able to rein it in or extend it. It's going to be far worse. And so, as empires throughout history ends, a lot of times what happens is they end up reset the financial system.
Okay.
And I know a lot of
By
people
the way, your audio,
say that.
Austin, your audio is cutting out a little bit. I just wanted to kind of clarify one thing right there. So you're saying is when the shit hits the fan and things are this bad, what they do is historically the powers that be reset the financial system in order to benefit. By the way, I'm getting a message here from our producer, Travis. He's saying it might be a good idea for you to exit and come back in order for the connection to fix itself. So if viewers, if you don't mind, let's give a pause here for Austin to log out and log back in, because I think that'll fix our audio issue.
All right, I'll be right.
Okay, all right, guys. So here we are with my pretty face, waiting for Austin to come back. Why don't we play that video, Travis, the setting the stage video, in the meanwhile? Unless I think. All right. So we have us. We're gonna play this video first, or?
So we're gonna talk a little bit about kind of how our banking system is about to collapse. Our enemies have built up, and so we're in for a lot of unrest. And one of the things that they're trying to lead us into this great reset, and a lot of the people in banking, they feel like this is the only way, right? What we're looking at is the crash of the dollar, is bank run, stuff. And so we, like, throughout history, when they're reaching their end, they will pop off these wars. And I talk about how it was orchestrated by the British royal family. And it was degrade and destroy the manufacturing capacity of a lot of Britain's competitors, and to order in the Middle East. Like, France got a bunch of countries after that. Britain got a lot of countries after that. There is this geopolitical game going on, and the game is about to be reset. In World War II as well, our leaders knew that Pearl Harbor was coming, and they were to kind of set that up and pop that off. And one of the reasons why that's because they are going at this from the calculus that they could possibly. So one of the things we're going to be, or the case I'm going to be laying out with you guys today, is that idea that we can win just by objective standards with the way the board has shifted against us now, and some dramatic action to survive as a country.
Okay.
So the first things we want to talk about are BRICS. So BRICS is a new economic world order started by Russia, India, China, and South Africa. and they are trying to create this new reserve. They are trying to draw all these other countries into their economic orbit. So they to the IMF and to the World Monetary Fund called and making huge inroads with a lot of these countries. And I think one of the things that in situation is just how many countries are not on our side. Our media likes to tell us that against Russia and on the side of the United States. And this is kind of one of the counting on as this develops and as China enters the fray. They are counting on our side. And so we're going to go through just how much the world is not on our side. Here, this map here, this is BRICS. And this is when it started. This is before the war. After the war in Ukraine, a bunch of countries, they are fed up with the United States. They're fed up with getting shaken down to do certain things, certain foreign policy wise. So if you look at this next slide here, this is BRICS after Zaf.
Okay.
All of a sudden, it doesn't. It was very formidable before, and a million times more formidable, right? And there's a bunch of things I want you to notice on this. All of the world's biggest populations would not be on our side. Two, geostrategic, economic choke point in the entire world is the Suez Canal. The world's supplies come through there. And if you look, Egypt is aligning against us. And so this is a huge problem. Africa. A lot of countries in Africa aren't going to be on our side. And we'll get into that in a second. People think, oh, no big deal. NATO is going to be, saving the day. We have this massive military on our side. But if we go to this next thing here, this is projections in NATO. Right? We got to be realistic that as this spring offensive starts to pop off and goes from putting kind of 20% of its weight on the scale towards finishing off Ukraine and towards a world war, none of these tiny countries in Eastern Europe that are part of NATO are going to be thing to have on paper agreements and us to have blackmail on certain diplomats to be able. But at the end of the day, when the rubber meets the road, these tiny countries like Latvia, right? They're not going to volunteer to be the front lines of a world war. And how is it fair to ask? How would that be fair at all? So a lot of these countries, as was the case in World War II, right? One thing, but when the rubber meets the road, they're going to be like, no way, we're not going to get fouled.
Yeah.
And
Austin, do you mind if so this is really great information, by the way. The thing I'm concerned about is the audio is still cutting out. How's your internet on your end? Is it is there software open on the computer or anything that we could shut off so the audio improves?
Pretty good to me here. Let me try to.
Yeah, because it keeps cutting out, and I know you're on the road, so I'm wondering if that has anything to do with it,
How's this?
It's actually much better. Did you take the Bluetooth off?
I just jiggled some wire.
Oh, you did?
There, good old fashioned. So hopefully that's better. But yeah, so kind of what I was explaining here, if you can hear me better, is the fact that Eastern Europe that are supposedly on our side, that are on our side on paper, are going to vote of a world war that's going to destroy everybody.
Yeah.
Right? Doesn't matter what the agreement says. They would surrender before they know that would be down for a brawl here. And Turkey, as you notice, they are already been moving towards BRICS, and China has been wheeler to Saudi Arabia and Iran, both of also which who want to join BRICS. And so think about a scenario like writing on the wall. They see the economic order shifting to the east in that direction, and they could say, okay, Iraq, for example, is a country created by the West after World War, completely weird, with a bunch of groups of people that don't even like each other. This is a disaster of a country as far as what if all the Shia sections in the Southwest go to Iran, like back these Sunni tribal regions in the Southeast go to Saudi Arabia, and what if all the Kurdish areas? I am quite certain, and we've seen this week with that agreement reached by Saudi to try to work together towards BRICS, this would be really bad for our allies, would not be our allies when it's all said and done.
Yeah.
So essentially, it would be Western Europe and the United States. Everybody else. And when I say everybody else, I mean Africa too. So if you look at Africa, just based on even trade numbers alone, right? They do way more trade with us. So I think we have a slide about this, but essentially, if people, and one of them you get 80% of your money from, and the other one you get 20% of your money from, if they're fun, which one do you choose? Right? The other thing is that Europe is very ruthless and imperialistic towards Africa. To this day, still doing this colonialism thing in North Africa. Many countries in North Africa to this day to hold the gold and precious metals that back their currencies in the French central bank to give French state companies the priority contracts to all their natural resources as for a long time. And they would see this as the opportunity to kind of get these colonial. As for China, they don't necessarily have any delusions that China's not trying to gain influence. You look at this next one, they've been building a lot of infrastructure.
Yeah.
Right.
Travis, our producer, was by the way sending a message. He's saying continue leaning forward because I think the audio is probably better when you're leaning forward, I guess.
Yeah, I fixed my lab here, so hopefully that helps.
Okay.
As we look here, Africa, China's coming and they've built a lot of roads and bridges and ports. And in the past, when the World Bank has come and done this, they've attached a lot of a lot of like unreasonable demands of we are in charge of how you conduct the affairs of your country. Look, economic confessions of an economic hitman. They'll go in there, the World Bank analysts, and any resources it will take to actually build stuff. So they will end up charging these guys and saddling them with debt. So if they owe all this money to World Bank, it's kind of choking them out in their ability. And there's this new world order developing, right? What's stopping this new world? You guys owe the United States, you guys owe the IMF, the World Bank, all this money, and it's choking you out. Tell you what, back up that claim, right? Many countries in Africa would be like, okay, deal, absolutely. Africa, like I said, would not be on our side. We just talked Europe. Let's talk about. I think the next slide was just demonstrating from the African Union some of the sentiment conveyed by the Africans. Right, they are interested in creating their own destiny here. Sick of the United States telling them what to do. Right, it's like we'll give you aid, but then you have to be our little pup to be able to develop on their own. So that's like the prevailing sentiment in Africa right now. In Libya, and the whole African Union was very vigorously opposed to that. So there's a thing.
So basically, is what's happened that more or less the U.S. has screwed over so many nations that now these nations really want nothing to do with the money, the strings attached that come along with a relationship with the United States.
So a lot of the United States, but we are not going to be the United States little pawns against China and Russia in our economic interests. So if China is willing to come in here and not interfere with our internal affairs and not shake us down into doing these silly sanctions against people that we do business with, where we want to go, we want to go the route of more independence here.
So they prefer a relationship with China because China doesn't inhibit their, I guess, internal kind of issues as much as the United States does.
Absolutely. And I think this trend as well, like in the rest of the world, that's very coldly received. You're giving aid money and you're saying it has to be, LGBTQ and all this different. People don't want any part of that.
Yeah, totally.
So they want to be able to make their own destiny. They have no delusions that China is seeking their own, to like pull everybody into their point of view. They've been getting abused from the United States for a long time.
Yeah.
So how is the fact that they're versus us trying to draw people in our harbor, how's that any different, right? So at
Yeah.
the end of the day, it just becomes considerations, dollars and cents, and terms and conditions, you know?
Yeah.
If we move over to Asia, right, I'm trying to set up the board here, right? We've already a large portions of it would not be on our side. That Africa would not be on our side. That surrender, right? They went along with us with NATO because they felt like this is the biggest, baddest dog on the block. Then so are they. And they would definitely just be like, you know, we're out. We're not involved. No way.
Yeah.
So if we pivot down to Southeast Asia, we have a little clip here that the mountains in Tibet, most election relies on water that comes from the mountains in Tibet. So I don't know if we could play that, show you what I mean.
Go for it. Please, Travis.
China has constructed more than 87,000 dams at a rate unmatched in human history. Collectively, they generate 352 gigawatts of electricity, which is more than the capacities of Brazil, Canada, and the United States combined. Now, however, after damming most of its internal rivers, China is looking to dam the major international rivers flowing out from Tibet. Nearly half of the world's human population depends on the Tibetan rivers, and as China taps into the water supply, it is increasingly able to dictate terms to the downstream periphery.
Wow, that's pretty actually cool how advanced they are in terms of having made the steps to build those and how far they are advanced from the rest of the world. That's what I took from that,
Yep, and I think water is one of the most important geopolitical resources that people fight over out there. And so think about this: if you have the ability to dam the rivers, if you do most of the trade with these by land, and you have the ability to dam those rivers and cut their water off, in a way that even went and sent fighter jets to go blow up those dams, right? That would just hurt everybody downstream of it in a tidal wave. Everybody in Southeast Asia would not be on our side. And as our military leaders are telling us, it doesn't matter if we act super belligerent with Russia. Russia's on their heels. We're going to beat them. Oh, and it doesn't matter if China tries to go, flex on them, and they'll just capitulate because we could sanction them and cause all the civil unrest. They're not seeing that. Nobody is going to be on our side.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, they should
just
know
decided
this
they want to join BRIC.
They should know this from the Iraq War. Nobody was on our side for the Iraq War either. I mean, it's obvious that most of the world is not going to necessarily follow our direction. We've known that for like 20 years.
Yeah, but this time it's still, get that blackmail on diplomats and government leaders and still kind of twisting along somewhat with what we're doing, at least verbally. And now, with a hot war, where the bullets are flying, right, all of that stuff's going to be out the window, right? That is not it in this new paradigm here if things are really getting hot.
Yeah.
And if on the wall they see the United States banking system collapsing, they see they see the world aligning against them, right? If you best future possible for your country, you're going to try to pick the side who you feel is going to win. And go through right now.
Yeah.
We've been lied to a lot by our military, our politicians, about what our actual readiness is for something like this to pop off. And the reason is we got the banking system collapse already in progress. First domino has fallen. And it's starting to pop off. And we've already pledged unconditional support to Ukraine. We have million there operating weapons, right? So essentially we already are in a hot war with Russia, and Russia is allied with China, Taiwan. And so it's going to be a really sticky situation for us here. Pretty cool. So let's talk about, let's do just like a regular style analysis of not what people are saying, not what adjectives they're using, but just the number of what our readiness is.
Yeah.
In our
By the way,
theirs.
Austin, before you go, continue on. Just real quick, I wanted to apologize to the viewer again because our audio is not that great right now. I mean, I know generally speaking, Austin, we're getting the message of what you're saying. It's just kind of skipping. So, firstly, I want to apologize to the viewer. We're going to continue with this episode, but I think Austin might actually be a good idea for us to consider even redoing this episode because it's obvious that the connection's a little bit shoddy right now. But we should continue with this episode and at least do one pass of it. You there?
I'm here.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. Okay. So let's continue where we left off at in terms of the world essentially not really supporting us and, pretty much leaving us out in the cold if we do decide to move forward with this war against Russia and China.
Yep. So and people got to understand, based on past trends here, we're not saying that we're going to accidentally get into war. We're saying that our leaders are into war.
They want to do this war. They want to do this war in order to cause the collapse because it's basically repeating what they did intentionally in other times in history, where they basically use wars to collapse the financial system and have things reset because they're essentially losing their power. They're at the end of their cycle.
So let's get into the nuts and bolts of the military comparisons here.
Mm-hmm.
The just traditional like standing armies here. What are the numbers looking like? Take a look. Out of the countries with the top militaries, the biggest armies on our side, right? First of all, China has way more people than us already. North Korea and Russia are up there, allies of theirs. But how many of those people, if we go to those armies, how many of those people?
How many what?
The armies one. If we could go back to the armies one, Travis. Yeah. India would not be on our side. Russia would not be on our side. Pakistan would not be on our side. Iran would not be on our side. South Korea, as we'll talk about immediately, right? They're surrounded. They would have their entire country destroyed if they went along with that. Vietnam would not be on our side. Egypt not on our side. Turkey not on our side. So this is a really bad situation. Just an easy win. I think as Americans, we are conditioned that we are always going to win. We just have some kind of secret sauce here, and that our military weapon of our competitors. But if you think back to Germany was way ahead of their competitors, everybody else in weapons development, and that didn't help them because a lot of the world aligned against them. So if we go to the Navy comparison, ships and submarines, we see that China and Russia, the people on that list that would be on their side, which is pretty much all of them, they have way more ships than us.
Wow.
Whoever has the most ships, a lot of times in naval wars, wins. Again, in good of ships is Germany. We just were able to overwhelm them with numbers. So they're part of the world. If you go to the next slide, this is just submarine. So the United States, we have the most submarines, but if you look at the people, it's not looking good as far as the total.
Wow. So essentially we're outnumbered, outfunded pretty much in all the key areas that dictate whether you could win a war or not.
Yep. So before Air Force numbers, a lot of people, they look at China's military budget of around 200, and they say, oh, ours, is vastly outnumbers that. But people got to realize it doesn't include space. It doesn't include their Coast Guard. It doesn't include R&D. It does include a lot of areas that ours does. So when you put those areas back the way we do, and then you account for exchange rates, cost of labor, cost of goods, almost the same amount on their military as we do. And they've been close for quite some time.
Wow.
They know they know that this has happened in history before. And they know that we got to the end of our financial line here that we were going to try to do a war to pop it off. So they've been getting ready. By far the biggest, baddest Air Force. But these other countries combined, we don't have the biggest. And if you remember, the F-35 schematics later lasted about 2 weeks before it was attacked by China. So they have a way greater all of the exact plans of exactly how we build our stuff. So that is not a good combination there.
Wow.
So if we go to the next one, this is, it's cut off a little bit at the top, but this is the number of military satellites, because there's a lot of people under the impression we're just, and again, if you look at the totals here and you look at the people who would be on our side versus who wasn't. So this is just traditional military down, numbers versus the numbers, and demonstrate that we are at nowhere near as much of an advantage as we thought we were.
Wow.
Or a lot of us are normally. And so if we go to the non-traditional military hardware, right? Because a lot of, I was saying this on somebody was asking a question. Oh, my, uncle relative is a colonel in the army, and he says we have about, and that there's some kind of secret sauce behind the scenes that's gonna huge disadvantage go away, right? The fact they have something that's gonna make that not a thing anymore or negate that. So if we go into something that would be at play in this world war, as opposed to the last ones, would be the fact that Russia, right? Normally the North Sea was off limits. Russia has been using all of that uranium that Hillary and that corrupt CFIUS board build a huge fleet of nuclear-powered ice-breaking ships that can just crush straight through the ice. And so they have that as resupply routes. They would essentially own that domain because compared to that. And we don't have the positions up there to be able to hold away. So if we could play that clip, I think we have a clip of that. If we could play the nuclear ice.
Cool.
So the next thing, if you look at arrays.
So could you explain that clip, by
China.
the way? Could you explain what we just saw?
We saw, say, some battleship-sized nuclear-powered ice-breaking ships were created using the uranium that Hillary and had given them.
Oh, wow.
In that corrupt deal, right? So that for us to do that. Not only can you make nukes with that uranium, but they are opening up an entirely the North Sea there. Normally it's covered by ice and ships can't operate there. But with these do operate there. So they could essentially come over the top. Way to stop them.
Got it.
So if we go to the next thing, we look at the China's been developing. There's a short video there. So this they were dealing with now.
This is not the
China's current naval policy is sea denial by means of anti-access area denial systems. These are a variety of missiles, air defenses, and electronic capabilities that can neutralize hostile forces and assets. The PLA Navy has invested vigorously in its anti-access area denial systems. While doing so, it has also developed lethal conventional forces that can exploit the openings their area denial weapons would create. By comparison, in 1996, during the Taiwan Strait crisis, China's area denial weapons weren't even capable of defending its coastline. The PLA Navy's missile arsenal could only reach as far as Taiwan and the US bases in South Korea. By 2003, however, China had expanded its infantry to hundreds of missiles, enough to deter foreign powers away from its coastline. By 2010, its inventory had grown to over 1,000 conventional short-range ballistic missiles. At the same time, it had developed more sophisticated missiles like the DF-21C, with an estimated range of 1,700 kilometers, capable of reaching targets in Japan and the Philippines. By 2017, China had built thousands of conventional medium-range ballistic missiles and hundreds of conventional intermediate-range ballistic missiles capable of reaching as far as Guam. Today, Chinese firepower at sea, complemented by its missile umbrella, is turning the scale in the Pacific.
Wow. Austin, honestly, man, tremendous research, by the way. You've really covered every single angle where, I don't know how anybody could watch this and see any gaps in your story, because you've literally covered every single angle of why we're in deep shit if we decide to start World War III with these guys.
Yep. So, and if you notice that last little ring layer there, weapons that can reach as far as Australia, Guam, and even like the tip of Alaska. So if we look at what hypersonic weapons are, they are missiles that China said that can destroy an aircraft carrier without a warhead. Wow. And what that means is that it does fast and hits things so hard that just the kinetic energy alone destroys the ship. They don't even there. And everybody acknowledges that China is way ahead of us in this. And the United States has. So we would go send our carriers, our Pacific Fleet, into the South China Sea if this thing, and it would be thousands of hypersonic missiles that we can't stop versus 6 carriers. We would get our Pacific Fleet would be crippled.
Wow.
And that would really empower into the Pacific, right? We would be on defense at that point.
Yeah.
So that's what, and then moving into this new phase of warfare. So if for everybody's seen that on the Western Front, it's a great depiction of how in World War I, advancements in technology, right? The people, they were not prepared for all the artillery and all the bullets coming at them. It was a change that forced people to rethink how they fought it entirely. This situation that we're moving into, we would have the same thing with these drone swarms. Wow. So little drones that they could send thousands or tens of thousands at the same time, and they all have little bombs on them, and they're overseas. So I think I lined up a clip from a movie here to kind of give you guys.
Wow. You never think that these tiny drones could basically obliterate huge areas, but I guess they can.
Yep, and I don't know if you heard what I was talking during the video. I don't know if the audio goes through on there, but
No,
these
the audio
drone
doesn't
swarms.
go through on there, so definitely repeat that if you can.
Okay, so these drone swarms, they could even need to be a guy flying them, right? They could choose their own targets, and they can go overwhelm them with explosive force here. So this would be an time of how war is fought, right? Most of the drones are made in China. They are way ahead of us. And in that movie, if you look at that movie, I wanted to show you what I mean in the sense of the drones now fly like 10 times as fast, and there can be 1,000 times as many. So I have the drones to give you guys an idea of what I mean by that.
Damn. Wow.
So, yeah, imagine with bombs flying at you, in their own way, like dodging bullets, dodging effort, are artificially intelligent enough to choose their own targets, right? After they cripple the Pacific Fleet, they could just go island to island and clear us out. And that is one of the big reasons why Japan and the Philippines would have to capitulate right away. So a lot of people out there, they'll be like, oh, well, you guys just don't know. We got some, nice secret tech that, we could. And to those people, I say, all right, let's look at what Raytheon's solution here is to those next clip. And you tell me if you think that this would work.
Yeah. Is the next clip you said, Travis? Wow.
So, as we can see, if there is like 10 drones flying, like can get them, or if they're flying in a group, we can get a few of them at a time. But the truth is, these arrays all over the place to even have a fighting chance of that. Our ships don't have that. Our bases don't. And that would cost a tremendous amount of money at this point to try to roll out in any sort of a quick way. Disaster. And this would turn the battlefields into a World War I type of a meat grinder for our troops there.
Wow.
So in this opening act, again, a lot of people, a lot of our leaders, they chance Russia and China and everyone to be on our side. But if we look at a map of who after this war, if we look at this map of who actually sanctioned Russia and who when the rubber meets the road is actually, that's what it actually looks like.
Wow.
Right? It's not the impression you would get at all if you listen to the right. And out of that map right there, like I said, Taiwan, South Korea, Turkey would flip, and now it would be, and then a lot of those Eastern European countries would, and then the board would be Western Europe and the United States. First, so in their opening act, right, they would try to take Taiwan, and they have those missiles that they can hit mainland Australia from China, right, with and they could take out these signals intelligence bases that we would be relying on to conduct any operations in Australia. So you should play that clip.
Wow. Go for it, Trav.
For instance, the Pine Gap facility in the Outback is crucial to American intelligence gathering by interception of signals. The base detects missiles, controls drones, intercepts transmissions across Eurasia, and talks to spy satellites in geosynchronous orbit. Meanwhile, the naval station at Northwest Cape beams data to US submarines. This allows American boats to tail Chinese nuclear submarines and sink them instantly should a war break out. The new AUKUS Pact, signed in 2021, will expand interoperability further.
Wow. Wow.
So they could take out our carrier of way more submarines to fight that submarine game, right?
No.
And this is our Pacific Fleet. Half of our Navy would get absolutely lit up in the South China Sea. And if we go, the board would be stacked there as this was going down.
Mm.
Like I said, the Philippines, and if you listen to Duterte and you listen to somebody saying, like, dude, we would not fight China in a war. We're not going to be your little attack dogs, the United States. Like, if stuff goes down, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
So Taiwan would be out, Philippines would be out, South Korea would be out, right? Little city sits within artillery barrage distance of the North Korean artillery. It's well within range of all those Chinese missiles, as does Japan.
Yeah.
Right. So these countries don't fight back. They could knock out our eyes and ears in Australia there, and essentially, like, would be left to fend for themselves because the entire Pacific Fleet would be getting annihilated. When the European allies in Western Europe went to scramble their ships to come help us, Egypt's not blocked, and South Korea is also, or South Africa is also not on our side. So as they try to come in a very delayed manner, they could get hit from things there too. And that's one of the reasons why our government, or South Africa, and so as much chaos there right now as possible. Because the board is looking very bleak for us at this point, right? China would own the Pacific. After the opening foray here, we'd be in big trouble.
Wow.
And right, so we would take a huge bite out of our military right at a time when our social tensions are at an all-time high, and when we have just this financial, right? Why, if you think about the war in Ukraine right now, has sent many of their bullets, many of their missiles, much of their gas, many of their supplies. Everybody's low until we can restock. Right? So if our banking is collapsing, why would anybody wait? Especially if, we're already de facto involved in this, they said, right? It's essentially the United States versus Russia there. And like I said, the spring offensive dramatically ramp up. And then come the calls for F-16s, and then ground troops. And then this is how it starts. Everybody looks back to like World War I, World War II, you think possibly happened, right? How could everybody have been so asleep at the wheel that they let something like that happen? Really crazy, right?
Yeah.
And how that happens is exactly what we're looking at right now. How World War is exactly what we're looking at right now.
Yep. You basically,
so,
it looks like you almost stumble into it. It's like mistakes and things that should have not happened, but nonetheless, it's really by design, right?
Yep. And our leaders, and they're being very stupid to be acting like this is a good idea or that we could just win this easily. We have a mix of corruption and we have a mix of stupidity. And the corruption is obvious, right? People, especially China. And the stupidity is we have a bunch of that their brain is stuck in a 1990s paradigm where China is just a gigantic paper tiger that take them, right? That is not the case anymore, as we have very clearly laid out.
Yeah, totally.
And it has supply lines directly from China to Europe, going through Central Asia. They've spent a lot of time building. As far as moving troops and supplies to the front lines quickly, they already have the networks to do that. So they control the Pacific, and they could finish off Western Europe, and essentially that manufacturing race, right? We had way less equipment as World War II to win over a few years because we were able to convert all of our manufacturing capacity into war factories, outproduced to be able to overwhelm these guys who had better weapons. Nazi Germany had better weapons, overwhelm them with numbers. Right? And so if we look at the manufacturing picture here, right, big chunk of our Pacific Fleet, many planes, many boats, and so we then, right, and we'd have to make a bunch of adjustments to try to cope with that and to try. And if you look at the manufacturing capacity, the economics of this, I think we have a slide on this. China has about double the manufacturing capacity as we do. Germany would be under fire. India, right? They would probably be out. They wouldn't do business unless they would do business with China. South Korea's capitulated. So the point is, they have greater manufacturing capacity than us. If you go to the next slide, they have vastly more manufacturing sector, right? So the arrows there are China and Russia and how many manufacturing workers they have.
Yeah.
Versus that's about 10 times. And then you eliminate out of there those lines the people that wouldn't be on, right? It would be a very bleak situation. And what manufacturing in the United States relies on raw materials from other areas. So we'll wipe out in the Pacific. We need to build a bunch of new ships quickly. And guess what? Guess where the world comes from? Right, we have a slide on this.
China. Wow.
Who's on our side, right? How are you going to build a bunch of ships with no steel? Then if you look at the next one, this is where rubber is produced. So if you want to build heavy machines, if you want to build vehicles, rubber. And where does all of the rubber in the world come from? Southeast Asia and Africa, right? Colonialism thing, where they would use colonies for types of crops, right? So there is no huge source of rubber even in our hemisphere. You go to the next one, you need a lot of bullets to restock. And guess what? This is the ability to produce the raw material lead, something you need for scenario. Australia is essentially occupied, right? So Australia is out, and this would be what we're up against. Mexico, they're out just because they joined BRICS. But the point is, look, this is the lead. This is what we need to produce bullets. If you want to make planes, you need a crap load of aluminum. Again, Australia would not be available to. And look at where we would stand with the aluminum production.
Wow.
Right. So these tough guys on TV, like it's really hard to understand why they don't get how are you supposed to build the things and have the things you need for war if you have no steel, no rubber, no good luck fighting a war, and good luck sustaining a war, especially one that you took massive losses straight up.
Yeah, I mean, these fools, and we have to call them fools, have done this over and over again. Like this whole going into war unprepared. It's not like the first time this has happened. I mean, this I think since World War II, we haven't won a war for real. It's almost like we only go into war so the military-industrial complex could feed itself, and it doesn't even matter if they're winning or not. The whole agenda is to basically make a lot of money.
Yeah, and they have completely taken their eye off the ball, right? They act for a hardcore place than you people who want peace think, and we just have to do this, to keep ourselves safe. You guys have completely hung us out to dry. You are lining us up for a situation, and so I think it's not sinking in for a lot of Americans. One, because we haven't had a really crazy war where a lot of people have had to go fight in a long time. And all essentially were against single countries that were much smaller than us, right? So the idea of what a war is minds and a lot of the American public's minds is like, oh, it's this far off thing that doesn't really affect me.
It's a cartoon. It's a cartoon. I remember when the Iraq War happened, and this is mind blowing. It was like the shock and awe campaign. It was almost like an event, like the Super Bowl. People were like sitting around watching all these, Iraqi cities get bombed, and I just couldn't believe it that like people are that distance from what the actuality of that means, which is that bombs are falling on the heads of children. Like it's the most horrible thing. People are in basements every time a bomb falls. It feels like an earthquake, but Americans are so desensitized and distanced from that. It's almost like a video game. They don't understand the immense tragedy of what that is. It's not a joke. It's violence. It's death. It's carnage.
And if we go back to the precedents before, and if we look at if you think about if this war went down, right, immediately there's no new clothes come from. There's no new electronics.
Yeah.
Right. Almost all of our electronics come from. There is no new anything. The food is. We would see how this goes. Where you'd go to the grocery store, and they'd be like, "Okay, you have such and such eggs. You get this many pounds of meat. You get this much cheese. You get a stick of butter." Right. There would be rations. There would be massive drafts, and we'd be doing this, right, trying to draft people in history, right, and how many men are going to volunteer to fight for
Could I
president?
answer that question, by the way? You cut out a little bit, but I think you said how many men are going to volunteer. You know what? I hope none, really, because this country has had a war against men for like decades. And right now, just, you'll see future episodes. I have at least 5 friends that are in jail over false accusations and bullshit. And so I hope no men enlist, because this country doesn't deserve the service of men. This country has betrayed their veterans and its men for decades now. So I hope that answer is nobody enlists, and, let the chips fall where they may, really.
Well, they would drafts, absolutely, right? So this would cause a bunch of chaos and unrest. And we've seen these young kids getting like dragged out of their home off to fight in Ukraine. It would be that sort of a situation here, right? And they would force a bunch of people. But I talk to people across the spectrum, right? If you talk, would you go fight for Joe Biden against China after he just sold us out to China? A lot of them don't really think I'd be very motivated to do that.
No.
I talked to a lot of my prison friends from various minority communities. Off, would you be down to fight? And they were like, for this country, like, hell no.
Dude, it's the most tragic thing. It's the most tragic thing how this country, I mean, it's really disgusting if you think about it, because in the last 50, 60 years, how many countries has the United States betrayed? Hence why we're talking about this topic right now, where if we decided to start a coalition, nobody would join that coalition. Big mystery there. I mean, we fucked over everybody in the world. That's number one. And then we fucked over all our men. So they're not going to fight. So it's almost like, I mean, sadly, it's comeuppance. I still love this country. I love the Constitution. I love what this country stands for. But these politicians have been such high levels of scumbaggery that they've literally turned the world against us. And in fact, the whole population has turned against the government now. That's a tragedy of what's happening.
So the big picture is we would be in no position to fight a war. And here's the one. In World War II, is 90% taxes, and there were 4 tax days. 87,000 IRS agents. Do you think that was for just, because they want to do preparing for a 90% taxes 4 times a year type of a scenario, right?
Yeah.
It's very abstract to us, right? It seems very crazy, but even JFK, right? He raised tax or lower tax rates from 90% to 70%, right? So long after the war as well, right? And this would be horrible for every electric grid. We would get hacked like crazy, and we would have rolling all the time across the entire country. If you guys have noticed, the CIA came out with this thing that it was in the newspapers. Oh, the CIA is activating sleeper cells inside sabotage operations. Because spy agencies during total wars, they turn from intelligence to like cloak and dagger operational forces, right? So the OSS, which was the CIA during World War II, their primary job was blowing up bridges, was sabotage, like pulling the power lines out of places.
Wow.
Was like causing chaos, right? So we such age of paper said, hey, we're going to get the CIA to go do sabotage operations in Russia. Yeah, cheered that on. And then guess what? Shortly after, what started happening? Food factories burning down. Trains started derailing. All this chaos starts happening, right? And school trains, food. Is that, like, people don't get, this isn't Afghanistan. These are serious countries that we're talking about. And when we do this kind of stuff to them, they have the ability, been showing that. They clearly have the ability to get us back. And that's one of the reasons right now in this situation in Mexico, right? Or Mexico joined BRICS, and obviously for people from every country getting into our country, it's really easy to get operatives in from there. Our intelligence services went and paid some low-level cartel people to just randomly murder so that they could designate these cartels as terrorist organizations and essentially occupy North Mexico, which they perceive as what this would need to happen. We are going to be able to put ourselves on war-fighting posture. They have that authorization for military that says anywhere there's terror, we could just go to war willy-nilly with no Congress authorization. And they do these terrorist attacks here to try to lay the groundwork for that.
Wow.
And if you saw the cart, they went and they grabbed those people, killed a few of them, and left a note saying, like, this was unauthorized doing that, right? Because I try to explain to people a lot. The cartels are not terrorists, right? With the exception of, it's not an ideological thing for them, right? The MS-13 is much closer to the ideologically driven standpoint of it than a lot of these Mexican cartels. But they're about their business. And their business is, right, if you tread on our toes, if you get in our way, right, it's a business thing. There's business considerations. And it's why, like, a lot of the resort towns in Mexico are so safe is because the car resorts. And so they make a huge effort to keep the violence away from those resorts so that their investment isn't hurt by that, right? They're business people. They're not just random terrorists that I just want to go kill them for no reason, like a wild animal. So this is the type of cynical that they do, that they would go hire a cartel in Mexico to kill America for us to be sending our military into Mexico, which for military force, so without anything like that.
Wow. That's absolutely bananas, man. That's absolutely bananas. So they could pit him with terrorism charges and use that as an excuse, which is actually something that we've heard with other, I guess, sectors of protests where they'll try to infiltrate, make them look like terrorists. And so now they're not seeing any due process. They, Patriot Act, they lose all their rights. So it seems like the same game plan here.
Yep. So, and one of the reasons they want this state, right, is because think about us trying to fight against China, right? When we're trying to go have operatives in their country, think about how easy it is for them to do is for us to do that there.
Yeah.
So,
by the way,
again,
I want to mention this for the viewer again, because the audio again is hit and miss. It's been pretty good for a sec, but we are going to re-record this episode because this is actually a documentary's worth of material that Austin's put together. It's mind-blowing. Like I was saying earlier, it's covering every aspect of it. Our government officials should have this because you've literally researched every possibility of this insane choose your own adventure novel here into destruction, and all of them lead to we are fucked. So we should, our politicians should know this information, and we should, and I guess this is the next step here that we're going to talk about, but we should do everything in our power to prevent this calamity from happening.
Absolutely. And we're in a tough spot because of the intelligence. They are sabotaging us so greatly, right? And that we are so soft versus they are such a hard target. It's like when these banks collapse, they're going to try to put us on this, and they're going to say, hey, unless you get a digital ID, unless you agree to this, you don't get your money back, right? So they could force us all into this, and they will try to say that this is justified because we're getting lit up by our enemies right now, right? So we're in a very tenuous, and so we have very little options. And with the bank,
basically what you're saying is that they're going to sacrifice millions of Americans so they could save their ass from the financial collapse that's coming. And rather than basically going to a new financial system that is for we the people, their plan is not only are they going to sacrifice millions of us, the end of this is going to be a full slavery digital system. That's their plan.
Absolutely, because they're saying that economics work in this country and how, Wall Street is kind of ridiculous in like sacrificing to make this quarter, right? That it's in the long term not a tenable system, right? And we could be going full communism like what they're trying to do. But they are calculating that we pull off this war and this full system, and then we can kind of recharge ourselves off of their treasuries after it. So that is a fatally flawed assessment, as we've just seen, and we are on track level of stupid and evil to pick a war that you would dominate this country, right? But it's an entirely new level of stupid and evil to pick a war in hell of winning. Yeah. And that is exactly what they're doing to us right now.
Yep. And what you just said, by the way, is they're picking a war, because you cut out. They're picking a war that we have a chance in hell of winning. Crazy.
That we have no chance in hell of winning.
No chance. Zero.
Yeah.
All right. Sounds wonderful.
So, what are our options here, right? Because we have this extreme. If again they say war by 2025, guys, you're trying to reshape the world, and that on you, right? They're trying to stage some Gulf of Tonkin stuff. They're gonna try to do something to like make things hot here when Russia goes on.
Yeah.
So everyone's low on ammo in the West. Oil reserves have been depleted. Our financial system's collapsing. And we'd be going into election cycles ever, right? Ever. People would be at each other's throats more than ever. For time, right? Wow. If you're going to do this, then to do this, again, not even after the election, before we don't have time to even get to that election.
Wow.
So what are the options here? We have very limited options, right? We need a regime change sooner, and here's the other interesting. This isn't the outline, but I thought I would throw. Something must change, right? And as you just have seen, leaders have been selling us out and conspiring with our enemies and leading us towards Armageddon. According to military laws and laws on the books right now, like the case he made that it is a national security threat to have this president, this vice president. There's that section Q in the House, Kevin McCarthy House, like the rules that he had to agree to become speaker. There's a section called Q, or with one person initiating, essentially vote him out and replace him as speaker. Right,
dude, and by the way, we got to pause there for a second. Section Q, like, come on, how? Like, what's the chance of that being Section Q, man?
So again, I'm not saying anything for sure. I'm not egging this on. Wink, wink. But we could do. They did a situation where they were able to force a vice president and a president to be able to sneak somebody in the lineup and essentially seat a sitting president with no election. If certain members of the military were to judge that this is our only hope of survival, as you see with the objective numbers over here, make that case theoretically, hypothetically, to make that happen, right? The Trump voters, right? As much as everybody craps on them, the vast majority of the people who would be actually fighting the war for this country, right? And or would the people, the minorities that have been abused for a long time and thrown in prison for a long time, probably not, no matter who's president. So really, like, the only people that would be willing to fight, they wouldn't do it for Joe Biden, right? So the board is getting really tricky right here. That was to happen, right? that would be, you know, situation, right? If they were to activate that article and they were to try to play a different president to help see us through that.
By the way, could I interrupt you for a second? There's the quick little thing. There's also the Lloyd Brunson case, by the way, in terms of potentially getting rid of all these individuals. The Lloyd Brunson case seeks to get rid of, I mean, half the members of Congress or more, and the president and the vice president. I mean, there's an episode on that. I won't get into too much detail, but in order to trigger something like this, the Supreme Court also has that case, which they're actually reviewing right now. So they could come out with a decision that ends in the same result you're talking about.
Yes, they could. And they have, like, our Supreme Court justices are very compromised. So they would have to have some pretty aggressive care on the other end to be able to do that either way, because they only care about what the media says.
Yeah.
And their legacy. Theoretically, it could be done. It could be done. And so in this hypothetical, the president would essentially need to come in, and it would be a all hands on deck emergency, right? He would need to find a way around something, right? He would have to find a way to sit well enough with enough of amount of people that we would be functional through. He would need to come in, and he would need to likely, especially he's been getting, and with how everybody's banks would be crashing, he would need of crumbs to keep everybody who doesn't have money afloat, to just essentially keep everyone from revolting, right?
Yeah.
So that sounds kind of like, and the the digital data clawback, where you get the universal passive income. About that in a previous episode, allowing people to be the owners of their own data and having whatever that's used.
Yeah.
So just a thought. This is a theoretical situation, of course. Then he would need to aggressively claw back our supply chain. Sense of urgency, right? No, it wouldn't be like we're just adjusting some trade deals. We're just doing this or that. Like, it would need like national security priority to get jobs and get manufacturing back in the United States. Like, not over the course of 20 years, like in the next few years.
Yep.
As
you're almost talking about you're almost, sorry to interrupt you, you're almost talking about a World War II type of mobilization where a lot of intense things happen very quickly.
I am, except in this case, this mobilization would be geared towards scales as opposed to actually popping off the war. It would be geared towards rebalancing the peace.
Yes. Yep. And by the way, I love the American peace flag behind you. It fits the scene very well here. You know, for people that don't know about that peace flag, we currently fly our wartime flags, and a lot of people that are looking to essentially restart this country and some of the things that Austin's talking about, look to that flag as being the future permanent flag of the United States.
A new symbol to inspire hope in the population and contract help inspire us, right, to being proud enough of our country again for it. Because right now, as you said, almost nobody would be willing to fight for this country.
Yeah,
and that's a huge problem. The next thing in this hypothetical situation, that president would be, he would need to make us as dominant in space as possible, right? Because with the manufacturing capacity, with the terrestrial forces, the only place that we have a chance of gaining a very aggressive edge space. And as we've talked about in previous episodes, you could control the entire board just from space.
Wow.
We would emergency basis, like, secure the borders, and we would need to take dramatic action and do whatever needs to be done, because they're wide open right now. That would potentially include to help us do so, right? In World War II, we made the docks. It would be that sort of situation here. And again, you can't call out to kill them, you'd be forced to be as like ruthlessly. We would need to secure sources of. We would need to claw back our supply chain and secure in this hemisphere. Namely, we would need to buy Greenland to twist the Queen of Denmark's arm into giving us Greenland like yesterday.
Wow. Is this why Trump was talking about Greenland so much? There was that sort of thing going on?
I believe so. He was thinking about it from the mineral standpoint, but it's the middle. They get upset with the idea of like a bunch of new mines, but it's like, would you rather those mines be in the middle of a beautiful forest, killing a bunch of animals and plants, or would you rather it be in the middle of a freezing wasteland, tons of miles from anybody and anything, and there's just ice and rocks out there, anyways?
Yeah.
The other thing, our position in Greenland, right? As we saw with the ice-breaking ships, they can come over, and we have no way to operate in that domain, and they do. So we need to have elements on Greenland once we got it to be able to prevent them from coming over the top with a massive splitting the United States in two, like what we did in Vietnam, right? When we went to Vietnam, we split them both fronts. We cannot allow that to happen in the United States. And so in addition to relocate the centralized one for fairness and for constitutional rights, it would be a pragmatic that we would need to move our capital to the center of the country, probably Kansas, so that we could be split and with how the board is laying out against us right now.
Awesome. That's actually a great idea, because Washington, D.C. is a complete cesspool, irredeemable, and it makes a lot more sense to have something in the heartland that represents our government, because Washington, D.C. is the furthest thing from it. I mean, you're talking about a foreign state, essentially,
Yes, sir. And so now it's not just about that we're doing that, because again, our government doesn't care about our rights. It would be, this is a emergency is another one of the reasons we're doing this, for practical military considerations. We likely need to secure is North Mexico and a big part of Sonora that have tried under NAFTA to move manufacturing back to this hemisphere, North Mexico, because they just can't quite afford the labor in the United States. So they're, after our Pacific fleet got completely wiped out, we would need another place to be able to be restaging a navy in the Pacific. Otherwise, that would never happen, right? A lot of people are like, oh, Mexico would never, ever, ever sell you a piece of North Mexico. And it's like, well, what if we agreed there as well? We did a similar to what they did in the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, where it said, we're taking this area, but according to this law, according to this treaty, which is theoretically still, and treaties are on the seniority of the law is higher than Mexicans were supposed to be allowed to come and go from California, Florida, and Nevada. So we could say, new Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, if you are Mexican, we're going to take this area. Not all these other countries, not everywhere on Earth, but if you are Mexican, you are free to come and go from this factories that are going to be built. And all this beachfront real estate right here that is primarily owned by now, the cartels could be persuaded from their own pragmatic business interests to get wealthy off of the vast appreciation of that coastline that is not anywhere near as valuable as it could, because people are scared, B, they don't feel comfortable doing stuff in Mexico, and Mexico, obviously a line in Mexico, that's a lot. They'd have to do land leases, and they have to do all this other stuff. Economically, we could go make deals with cartels, we could have them in, and we could woo all of the poor Mexicans that are desperately for work. We could give them a spot to go without coming fully into the United States. That, hey, here's a place that you could go to feed your family, right? And we could do that new sort of a deal. But again, getting this area of Mexico, as things pop up. So we could do it in the existing deep state way of go hire a bunch of Americans in Mexico and lay the groundwork for a American invasion. That would be, or we could be pragmatic and we could go try to make deals with some unsavory people just the right way. So that's really our two options here.
Okay.
Absolute emergency. And this is something I think that the left could get on board with. Already gave them the universal passive income. We need to, on an emergency basis, these Energy 3 technologies. So we are caught right now in a paradox. Energy 2 technologies. Energy 1 technologies, that's like oil, gas, fossil fuels, all this stuff. Wind, solar, renewables. And the problem is, with this Energy 2 that these are trying to foist upon us, is that one, they take a crap load of minerals, mining, smelting all that iron, moving it, all the materials it takes to make that, which is the other fossil fuels before it. And it only works intermittently. So it's not for actually transforming our grid. What we're saying right here is we need to dramatically move quickly towards Energy 3 technologies. Energy 3 technologies are, and on this site here on qintel.pro, I have 4 separate technologies of companies have patents ready to go for prime time right now that we could do this like in the next few years. We could decentralize our grid. So have people be generating power at the point where it's used. So modular low energy nuclear fusion reactor, and it's small enough and safe enough to be able to put it on site at a factory somewhere. So if you're like the Intel factory, right, we're going to need a lot of semiconductors on site there, and just essentially have your own power plant. You don't need to rely on the sketchy grid. You don't need to buy from that drone. The next thing is this asymmetrical magnetic propulsion. This technology has been around, so was even talking about it in some ways, and it's just been very suppressed. It's essentially like a machine just keeps spinning, and to keep doing that forever and make yourself money as a thing, you could put a generator on your house, and your house just always has energy. You never have to pay for it. You never have to pay for energy ever again.
Wow.
Graphene harvest and graphene energy. So this is tapping into the quantum mechanics here of graphene, and it's that you could put in your phone, you could put in your computer, you could put in sensors and cameras, whatever. It powers itself, and it never ever needs to be charged. Right, just unlimited battery on your phone, just generates its own power right there on the fly.
Wow.
The next thing, and these nanodyne battery cells, right? This could plug right into something like what we have right now, especially like Tesla, for example. If we use these nano-ion batteries, we could have batteries that just are always like, you have a car that you drive as far as you want, and it just always has power no matter what.
Wow.
And when you get home, you could plug that car into your house, and you could power your house off that.
By the way, could I say one thing? Could I say one thing? Everything you're talking about has already been invented, existed, and really what's happened is a lot of these inventions we're talking about that give us perpetual energy, the makers of them have been off by the government. That's like, there's a lot of examples of that. I know, for example, like, in the 90s, there was a hydrogen cell car. That dude, after getting $35 million from the government in order to basically bury his invention, he was found hanging, which is interesting. A guy just made $35 million, dream come true, and next thing you know, he's hanging. And you hear this kind of story over and over again. So these technologies have been around, and I think in terms of the asymmetrical energy system you're talking about, that's been around since the 30s and 40s. And again, people that invented that disappeared. So what we're really talking about is, once you remove the Federal Reserve, once you remove these corrupt organizations like the BAR, the globalists, all of a sudden, all this stuff that's already in existence, we could now start using it, creating our own energy, not relying on these like energy inhibitors that don't like the fact that there's all these cool inventions, but it takes away from, their cash cows. So they off people, they get rid of people that invent these things. But with that Federal Reserve System gone, now they're not going to be able to keep doing that. Hence, we could have our free energy or cheap energy and all these great inventions.
Yep. And so these are companies, like I talked to the leaders of some of these companies, tell me is that they could get this going right away, but their biggest challenges are that have underhanded motives that are coming in there and trying to essentially buy their stuff, kill it and sit on it and never let it come out. And this has been happening for a long time. Regulatory approval from the government. So the CEO of that modular fusion company, energy guy, like a week before Biden tried to do that sale of this like gigantic centralized fusion thing that they don't even have ready to work yet.
Yeah.
And they heard that, somebody has fusion. We got to pretend that we're trying as the government and like show off our. This is the kind of thing our government, and this a lot of lefties need to understand this. Our government is fixing our energy, right? And our government, we don't, with these new technologies, force everyone to buy this stuff if it's just way better. If you could just buy a phone that you never needed to make a bunch of BS rules and force everybody to buy that stuff, they'll just do it because it's way better.
Yeah.
So between the big money trying to crush them in a lot of cases, between the government getting in their way and manufacturing partners, right, being squeezed by other big interests into not take their technology prime time, right? Because if we want to, for example, have 1,000 of those shippings in them a month over the next few years, they need to have a massive manufacturing capacity. So this is the kind of thing, a real Green New Deal, but one that is driven by national security interests, and it's got to happen ASAP, because if this thing goes, they're trying to make it in the imminent next few months, this will be a huge vector. Power grid will get lit up, right? Hospitals will be out of power, traffic light, it will cause chaos in our. Let this power grid that we have now be the thing that we're fielding in the next. So we got to take dramatic action to make that happen. We can. I think we got to start, like I said, talking about universe paths, talk about energy, and talk about the gravity of the geopolitical moment that we're in. Right. Try to, I guess, help people understand, get as many people on board as possible.
Yeah. And
people ask me, so okay, if the financial system's hitting the fan, if there's going to be bank runs, even if you did get your cash out before the bank run, if they're about to just try to godly amounts of money and cause this massive Zimbabwe level inflation, then what do you do, right? It still doesn't help. And so people ask me like, hey, should I buy gold? Should I buy silver?
That's actually, could I pause you there? That was actually what I was going to ask you. There's a gentleman that put in a question here, dude by the name of Ride the Spiral. Question for Austin: if Austin was buying, would Austin be buying gold and silver or XPR in this current climate?
This is a lively conversation I have with a lot of people a lot of times, right? So they point to the fact that central bank precious metals to try to last their way through this turbulence here. And yes, that might work for central bank, right? And the money's collapsing and the banks aren't working, right? You're just trying to go buy food or whatever you need to just survive on a day-to-day basis. Is gold a really you're going to have a gold bar and be like, oh, I want to buy a few groceries. Here, let me like chip off a tiny piece of this and then let you trade and all this stuff. It's just not an effective medium for exchange.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, Bitcoin. And it's like, well, Bitcoin, right, would the network would still be up. It doesn't clear very fast. It's not it's practical if you wanted to hold value for a while at all. If you want to interact on a day-to-day basis in a kind of reasonable way.
Yeah.
I get some pushback on this, but this is something I've been saying for a long time, is that as in my personal opinion, and I think there's a lot of but it makes the most sense to be holding XRP or completely hitting the fan. And the reason is it has enough decentralization not to, a lot of central banks, so the Central Bank of Saudi Arabia specifically, they are using XRP to help facilitate the country, right? So essentially, they will be on this massive pool of oil when there's chaos. And XRP is something that is liquid enough to trace this, quick enough, fast enough. It's something that the network would go down. And it's something that major central banks have been buying, like not just from the West, but from other places too. Huge, be able to transact through it and facilitate instantaneous crossing this liquidity here. But the fact that a player like Saudi Arabia is using, like they would be propped up by their oil revenues because the price of oil would go way up. Safe bet, in my humble estimation. Also, a lot of these big banks and central banks, they are building XRP like a back end into, if you look at their patent, they're building XRP and XLM into the like the functionality to interact with that into their back system, right? So it's something that gives you, you and people are like, oh, it's like, isn't that like a central bank digital currency? It's not somebody that they could just take money. It's like, well, no, if you hold it in a wallet instead of an exchange, then you're not tied to the fake exchanges could be going under too.
Wow.
So it's something that you could have instant transact with. That you'd have a pipeline back into the fiat rise in the future. And it's something that you know as this chaos develops, and there's already a lot of people that hold it, and it clears fast enough to be just a lot of reasons. And people are like, oh, well, what about real estate? And it's like, well, if real estate collapse and people can't do mortgages, then the real estate market crashes with it.
Wow.
Other commodities. If there's a gigantic world war, nationalizing sources of commodities, there's no like private ownership of that. And that's the other thing. When it went bankrupt in the 30s, what did they do? What did FDR do? For you to own gold, and he forced everyone to turn in their gold to the government for a certain price from doing the exact same thing. So I think having decentralized currencies clear quickly, ones that are the network is in a position to be able to last through. I think this SEC thing is going to clear up here in the next few months. And like I said, is what when everything's hitting the fan, the functional utility of the thing is what matters. People are able to transact, right? In Russia, after the fall of the Soviet Union, the vials of vodka, right? Those little single shot things of vodka, because at the end of the day, functionally easiest to use. And I just don't think that's gold. That's not real estate. That's not Bitcoin. That's not be an XLM. If I think there's a very compelling case to that. And like yourself out way into crypto world, you're still having that pipeline back to the fiat world. So on our hands. And pretty much the only way to stop this crazy situation, a complete, I would say party style uprising of the people to remake our constitution and overthrow our government peacefully and democratically, geopolitical struggle, or these generals and that do have their eyes on the ball are going to hit the emergency switch of like this Q coup here, and on an emergency. And like I said, I think that in the Supreme Court they could probably end up getting away with that if there's a variant for it, which, as we've seen, there is. So we are very limited on option fast here. But I think right now, sticking to decentralized principles, explaining to people what's happening, make this as minimally chaotic and violent as possible is what around all of our parts right now. And I think warning the people that a lot of people don't. You saw at the FDIC, you see in these leaked banknotes, they don't want to tell anybody that it's going to crash until it starts hitting the fan, right? And so, like, anybody that should at least know that this is a thing. They should know that it's not just Silicon Valley Bank. Another one just went on. And there's bank runs on other ones, right? So this is a cascade. People think like, oh, no, this couldn't happen. There's not that many people who are that offsides with their fundamentals. And to that I say, it's not always about the fundamentals, right? Situations like this develop, and 80% of it is mass psychology, right? And if the mass psychology is dropping like flies, and either the government can not save the deposit and things will panic, right? But at least we won't print more money. They can either, by printing trillions and trillions and trillions more dollars and currency, or they could just let the banks collapse, which would destabilize our entire system. Either way, they really have no good options.
Wow.
And so we are at the weakest point that we've ever been, and we are in completely uncharted territory. And like I said, normally a military coup would be completely out of the question, like absolutely justification for that. But if you looked at it from, say, back there that was like completely in the know, somebody that did have their eye on the ball, there is a tangible, like, compelling case for a military coup right now. That's a scary spot to be. Very scary spot to be at. We've never been there before as a country. And so we got to, get prepared, and we got to try to, I think, make this as, like, there's going to be a lot of people that are freaking out, right?
Yeah.
As the left has this COVID awakening here, right, where they realize, hey, this didn't work, like they are legitimately poisoning us.
Yeah.
I'm super concerned, like, mass loss of faith in the government, but those lefties that, like, those really hardcore Team Blue people on the shots that are now, like, having lifelong health issues, this isn't just going to be, like, potentially terrorism and, like, crazy. Like, think about how mad people are going to be. National Guard and all those fences for the Trump supporters, right?
Yeah.
But the truth is, for Team Blue and the Team Blue activist class over there, after they realize COVID dam continues to break and people start to realize exactly how bad this is. So it is time as a country here. And so go to qintel.pro. We're trying to lay out a vision here of, like, what we need to do as far as like talking about some of this corruption and, like, how we could have possibly gotten into a situation. And we are working on building the overwhelming democratic mandate that we need to do. Whatever else happens, whatever else the people up there decide to do, that we could be having, that is not Armageddon.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, for the viewer, a couple of things I wanted to mention. First, on a practical level, this has been an amazing episode. And Austin, frankly, even though the audio from coming through because of the internet connection issues, frankly, has been terrible. The reason I didn't stop this episode is because I'm looking at the numbers. There's still a lot of viewers, and thank you, viewers, for staying on. I know it's been hard to understand every single word, but it's obvious that people are compelled, because I thought the viewers were just going to plummet because of the audio issues, and that's not what happened. Second thing, I would love to redo this episode because it's too good of an episode. We should just do a clean pass in the next few days, even though you'll be repeating some information. But I mean, like I said, you collected a documentary.
No, we should do technical issues tonight, as everybody's My earpiece here keeps falling out. I gotta get the little thing.
And honestly, I think that's part of the issue, but the viewer doesn't need to be worried about that. I think there's a Bluetooth thing, but you and I will figure that out. We'll reshoot this episode in the next couple of days and make sure that we have a clean pass to this because it's just fascinating information. The third thing I was going to mention, and this is more on the topics that you were talking about, is that we're talking about essentially a transitionary phase, right? All indications from the interviews that we've done is that our financial system is going to collapse. That's their intention. That's what they want. And frankly, that's what people like Austin and myself want, because the financial system is how we've been enslaved through the Federal Reserve and the Bar Association. And if that falls apart, their power falls apart. But they're going to try to seize power. And at the same time, there's people like Austin, myself, and people in this freedom community that are going to try to seize power themselves by going essentially not with the digital currency, but something that doesn't further enslave us, decentralizing everything, decentralizing energy, currency, and what was the third one? Decentralizing? There was three of them.
Finance.
Which one?
And I'm really glad that Elon Musk and media, and I'm really glad that Elon Musk had he not, like, I think a lot of people wouldn't even know about what's happening right now. It would be completely censored, and everybody did. So we are in a very like tenuous spot. People got a geopolitical moment. I know normally like us over here at the whatever conspiracy crowd, we see it being dramatic, but like we are not being dramatic.
Oh no, we're not being dramatic.
Like, the writing is on the wall in every way. So do something really like, so we wanted our financial system to be like, but we don't want it to be this uncontrolled fall that just plunges us into chaos, right? There's a lot of people that rely on the banking, people that rely on services provided by the existing system, and just because it's terrible, if we do it, if it falls apart in a way that allows our enemies to, then we're screwed. And I was gonna comment the other day. He was saying like, oh, Elon Musk is tricking everybody. He's with the blah, blah, blah. And it's just it strikes me as like, right, so naive. He's so caught up in fighting this internal struggle versus the deep state that what is the geopolitical struggle going on over here, right? And I think for a lot of the actual deep staters, all right, we're at the end of the road either way. And we still have the internal struggle with these other forces that we got to be wary of as we're trying to get rid of this corruption in our government, helping put their finger on the scale for this corruption, because I think they see this as the only. And I think people like Steve Bannon could be taken a lot more seriously. They toned down the rhetoric for a second, like backed up and looked at the board of like, hey, we did space by 1 million miles without Elon Musk, right? Elon Musk has put up as much cargo into space, as pretty much the entire country of China. And our defense contractors have been screwing around, right? They've milked these contracts. They don't follow through. If it was up to just our traditional defense contractors, if doing stuff to like automate our car factories in a very short amount of time, right? Without that, this would be a much more bleak situation calculus, right? So I get that like he doesn't agree with everything that Elon does, the nano diamonds stuff, the new kind of batteries to China. I give him the old crap that isn't. And you just got to understand, like, Elon is one of those, like, here, right? We don't agree with everything, his background, everything he does, but, like, he's the only one, like, seriously, Bill Gates is doing anything to keep us in the game. That any of these other guys are doing anything besides trying to, like, so, we don't always love everything about our allies here, but we got to look at who is acting most in our aligned best interest here. And without Twitter, without SpaceX, with Tesla, this war outlook would against the Chinese Communist Party, that would be in a way worse situation. So hopefully he will reassess that and understand that it doesn't seem like a lot of people do yet.
Wow.
It amazes me that a lot of people still don't understand what gang will come out in Arizona. Like, oh, this is a local cartel controls a lot of your government. And I can campaign like a few months back. You guys do. You guys work with Joy Gilbert up there with Jerome Davison down here.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of like you got, and I told Joey this too after he got that primary. So I was like, you guys realize these states are run by the mafia and the intelligence services, and
Mm-hmm.
like you don't act according as you're going in, you're not playing the same game as that they're playing. So I see like it is that bad. The worst case scenario is true, and that emergency action is fine, and it's not radical. It'd be radical. The radical solution right now would be to just stay the course, calm, with exactly
and you know what
right now.
And these are people talking, by the way, that said 3 years ago that this COVID vaccine was dangerous. There was an ulterior motive to it, that these lockdowns were insane, that what they're doing to children was child abuse. We said these things 3 years ago, and they called us crazy 3 years ago. And lo and behold, this has been basically a genocide via jab and destroying children's mental health, destroying children's IQ, their futures, by doing these idiotic things. So those same people today are basically saying this government's about to fall. You better listen, fellas. You better listen, because you're the one that's not going to be prepared. We're prepared. We've been thinking about this stuff for a real long time.
Yep. And what better just destroy our military readiness than to force through in a corrupt way it's everyone's cardiovascular health, right? Yep. So like one of the most critical things to being a soldier that there is, right? It's fine. And we hope everybody will listen. We're sorry about the technical issues this evening. We'll definitely put together an episode here when we can get these figured out. But I'm on my little like wired mic and my little tripod here. But this is an important enough story. Wait, this is anybody who is thinking about other stuff besides this. This is the most important thing, right? End of the line as the United States of America. And what we do next will determine whether or not. Whether what we do next
will determine whether we are slaves or we are free people, like the original vision of this country. That's what's going to happen next.
Whether we are able to somehow like balance the scales and maintain the peace, or whether we're going to get destroyed. Our idiotic government started on purpose, so everybody's just going to blame us, right? It would be like if nobody felt bad for Germany because it's like, hey, you guys started that in the first place. It would be the same thing here, where like, hey, the United States, you fucked around, you found out, right? You started that shit. Quit messing with that. But you learned in the hardest way possible by shedding the blood of millions of your people, plunge into economic ruin.
Yep. Austin, this is awesome. Obviously, we're going to redo this again. It's going to be a lot of fun redoing it again. But it's funny. I'm looking at the viewership, and it's just getting higher and higher. So even though the audio sucked, the story is so compelling, and obviously people love you. So that's why they're on here. But we will redo this episode. Is there anything else we didn't touch upon that you'd want to say in closing, Austin?
We got to unite under a flag that everybody can be proud of. We got to adjust the rules a little bit to exist, because the reason our soldiers want to go fight for America, the thing that make America great, but hasn't been lately, is our Constitution and our values and the fact that we're supposed to use the most, right? As this January 6th thing has shown us, if that doesn't exist, who are you going to be able to convince to save this country?
Exactly.
Right. And not just fight as physically like in a war, but fight like in the manufacturing, in giving our leaders a chance to figure this out. And who's going to follow a president into a war that sold them out and sold all the military secrets in the first place? A president that let that Chinese spy balloon scout out all of the nuclear silo sites in Montana so that should the need arise.
Yep.
Right. A president that you saw that thing. Our military got caught putting compromised Chinese steel into our tanks, right?
Yeah.
Because we don't have the steel to physically build, getting sold out left and right. And now it is risen to the point of where it's an existential threat, and we got it seriously. And everyone will help us spread the word about what's actually about to get real wild.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Ignore this information at your own peril. Let your friends know, and especially let the people know that do not listen to this information normally. Let them know exactly what's going on, because survival, it's your survival. It's your family's survival. We are looking at a slave system versus freedom. And unless we come together, we're not going to, I mean, some of us might get our freedom in little colonies, whatever, but as a country, we're going to lose it all if we don't come together. Austin, thank you so much for showing up to the Blood Money podcast. I can't wait till we redo this again, because this is just I mean, look, our viewership just doubled in the last like 10 minutes and the audio sucks. So we got to rock this out again, you know?
Well, thank you, sir, very much for to leave everybody with the final note. The history of tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
How will you be remembered?
How do you remember?
Will we rise to the challenge, or as many empires have before us, into a terrible so everybody, for more information, go check out qintel.pro and check out our next recording of this when it comes out, so we can choose.
Awesome. Next couple of days, we'll do that. Again, qintelpro.com. This is Van Miller from AmericaHappens.com. There's the Blood Money podcast. Please check out AmericaHappens.com for our latest episodes. We post episodes every single day, including the Joy Gilbert podcast, Gloves Off. Mindy Robinson does 2 shows on AmericaHappens.com. Actually, her latest episode of Conspiracy Truths is on fire. Episodes by Tom Renz, episodes by Gianna Michelli, and so much more. So check out AmericaHappens.com, and thank you for joining us for this episode of Blood Money.